It was just past midnight in the small town of Hawthorne, Oregon, and the streets were silent under the pale glow of the streetlights. A thick fog rolled in from the nearby Willamette River, curling around the lampposts and creeping along the cracked sidewalks. Most of the town's residents were asleep, unaware of the dark night that had settled over them, but not Ethan Parker. Ethan, 17, sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, his laptop balanced on his knees. The glow from the screen cast eerie shadows across the walls, highlighting the peeling wallpaper and the scattered remnants of a life half-lived old trophies, dog-eared books, and a pile of unopened letters from his mother. On the screen was Granny's House, a horror game that had gone viral across the country. The concept was simple: escape from a decrepit house while avoiding a terrifying old woman who seemed impossibly fast, impossibly cunning. But Ethan didn't care about the story. He cared about the challenge and the rush. He clicked start, and the screen flickered. For a moment, the familiar layout of the game, creaking floorboards, dark hallways, the faint hum of a grandfather clock disappeared, replaced by an image that made his blood run cold. A photograph, a dimly lit room, a shadowed figure standing in the corner. It looked exactly like his bedroom. Ethan blinked, thinking it was a glitch. He leaned closer to the screen. The shadow didn't move at first. Then, slowly, it raised a hand. A sharp, skeletal hand. His heart jumped. No way. That's not part of the game. He reached to close the laptop, but it wouldn't respond. The screen froze. Then, a whisper, faint and raspy, seemed to seep out from the speakers. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan." He yanked off his headphones, but the whisper continued, echoing from the room itself. His door creaked. Then, silence. Ethan shook his head, trying to convince himself it was all in his imagination. But a chill ran down his spine. The shadows in his room seemed denser, almost alive. He could swear he saw movement out of the corner of his eye, but every time he turned, nothing was there. He tried to shut down the laptop again. The screen went black for a second and then powered back on by itself, displaying the same figure, closer this time. Its eyes, milky white and unblinking, were locked on him. Its mouth twisted into a silent scream. Ethan stumbled back, tripping over a stack of books. He hit the wall and scrambled to his feet, backing toward the door. It wouldn't budge, locked, and then, in the corner of the room, just behind his desk, he saw it move. Slow, deliberate. An old woman, ragged and twisted, emerging from the shadows. Her skin was pale and cracked, her eyes like frozen marbles. Her long, bony fingers reached toward him. Ethan's scream caught in his throat. He dove under his bed as the figure glided across the floorboards. The old woman's dry, rasping laughter filled the room. She didn't just look terrifying, she felt terrifying. A presence that clawed at the edges of his mind, feeding on fear. The laptop, lying on the floor, flickered again. On the screen, words appeared in jagged, blood-red letters. Run, or stay, forever. Ethan realized then, this wasn't the game. This was real, and something told him, with bone-deep certainty, that once the game had started, there was no turning back. Ethan's breaths came in ragged gasps as he huddled under the bed, his fingers clutching the edge of the mattress. The room was deathly silent now, except for the faint hum of the laptop. Its screen glowed a sickly red, as if taunting him. He wanted to move, to run, but every instinct screamed that stepping out would be a mistake. The old woman, the thing hadn't left. He could feel her presence, like a weight pressing down on the air around him. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time seemed to stretch and warp. Finally, Ethan dared to peek out. The room looked empty, but nothing felt right. The shadows clung to the corners, darker than they had ever been. Moving like liquid, the whisper came again, soft and dragging. "Don't leave yet." Ethan's stomach churned. He wanted to scream, to run outside, anywhere but the front door wasn't just locked. It wasn't there. When he glanced toward it, the room stretched farther than it should have, walls bending, molding themselves around him like a living cage. The laptop flickered one final time before powering off. Silence, and then the floorboards creaked, slow, deliberate, toward his closet. He swallowed hard, heart hammering. A door handle rattled. He wasn't alone. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from his desk drawer, shaking as he clicked it on. The beam cut through the fog of shadows in his room, illuminating nothing. Then, a floorboard groaned behind him, a scraping, dragging sound. Slowly, he turned and saw the outline of a doorway he didn't recognize. It wasn't his bedroom door. This one was black, ancient-looking, framed in rotting wood. As if it had grown there overnight, something compelled him, terror mixed with an unexplainable pull, and before he could stop himself, Ethan approached. The handle was cold, icy, like it belonged in a grave. He hesitated. Then, taking a deep breath, he opened it. The air that rushed out was different, thicker, damp, smelling of earth and decay. Beyond the doorway was a hallway he had never seen in his house. The walls were covered with peeling wallpaper, and the floor was warped and splintered. Faint candlelight flickered down the corridor, casting long, grotesque shadows. And at the end of the hallway, he saw it, a house within a house. The structure was twisted, like a nightmare version of his own home, with warped windows and doors that seemed to move on their own. The old woman was nowhere in sight, but he could feel her eyes on him, watching, waiting. A sudden sound of child's laughter, echoing from deep within the house, made him freeze. The sound was playful, innocent, and wrong. Ethan forced himself to step forward, flashlight shaking, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. The air grew colder. His breath fogged in front of him. The whisper returned, louder this time. "You came, now you stay." A door creaked open in the distance, revealing a dim room with a rocking chair swaying slowly, as if someone had just been sitting there. On the chair, a small, tattered doll stared at him, its glassy eyes cracked and leaking dark stains. Ethan's stomach turned. The doll, it moved. Its head tilted slowly toward him, following him as he took a hesitant step forward. Then dash without warning, the door slammed shut behind him, throwing him to the ground. Darkness swallowed the hallway, and the whisper was no longer a whisper. It was a scream, all around him, inside his head, and from the walls themselves. "You belong to the house now." Ethan's scream echoed back at him, bouncing off the warped walls. He scrambled to his feet, realizing with a sinking, icy horror that the house wasn't just in his room, it had claimed him. Ethan's chest heaved as he pressed his back against the warped wall, the flashlight's weak beam trembling in his grip. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to run. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, twisting unnaturally, like the house was alive and reshaping itself around him. A cold breeze brushed past his neck, carrying a faint, metallic scent. Blood. His stomach churned. He knew he wasn't imagining this. The whispers, now louder and more insistent, slithered through the air, echoing in the darkness. "They are here. You can't hide." A door ahead creaked open slowly. Ethan froze, straining to see inside. The room beyond was pitch black, except for a faint, flickering light in the corner. Something moved. A shadow, elongated and warped, slid across the floor. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself forward. Every step was met with the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then, he saw it. A woman, but not human. Her skin was pale and peeling, her eyes milky white and unblinking, just like the figure from his bedroom. Her mouth stretched into an impossible grin, and dark, congealed blood dripped from the corners of her lips. She didn't walk. She glided, moving toward him with unnatural speed, her long, skeletal fingers outstretched. Ethan froze. Panic clawed at him. He raised the flashlight, shining it directly at her, and for a moment, she recoiled, her face twisting, in fury. Then, in a blink, she was gone. A dry, rasping sound, code from behind him. He spun around. Nothing. The hallway had changed again. The door he had entered through was gone. In its place was a wall covered in peeling wallpaper, with scratches etched deep into the plaster, like claw marks. Ethan stumbled forward, tripping over a loose floorboard. His hands hit the ground, and the flashlight rolled, casting frantic beams across the room. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and bending unnaturally. Then he saw them, the dolls. Hundreds of them, tattered, broken, glassy-eyed dolls hanging from the ceiling, their heads tilted at impossible angles, staring directly at him. Some moved ever so slightly, like they were breathing. Ethan gagged. He backed away, his hands trembling. That's when the whisper returned, closer this time, right behind his ear. "Do you see now? You can't leave." A hand cold and skeletal grabbed his shoulder. He spun around, but no one was there. Yet the pressure lingered, as if invisible fingers were still clutching him. Suddenly, the doll's heads snapped in unison toward the far end of the room. A faint glow appeared, like candlelight, revealing a door partially ajar. Through it, Ethan could see a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Something in him, a mix of fear and a perverse curiosity, pulled him toward it. Step by step, he descended, the air growing colder with each movement. The whisper followed, turning into a chorus of voices. "You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have come." At the bottom of the staircase was a basement unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Walls covered in grotesque drawings, depicting the house itself consuming people. Rusted chains hung from the ceiling. In the center, a large wooden table was covered with dozens of tattered notebooks, each filled with frantic, unreadable scribbles in blood-red ink. And then he saw it sitting in the corner, rocking slowly in a chair, a shadowed figure hunched over something, its head lifted, and Ethan realized with icy horror that it wasn't human. Its face was twisted, melting like wax, and one milky white eye stared directly at him. Ethan tried to scream, his voice caught in his throat. The creature leaned forward and whispered, a voice like broken glass, "The house chooses its prey." Ethan stumbled back, crashing into a shelf. The notebooks tumbled to the floor, pages flying like crows in panic. And then the basement door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness, trapping him with the thing. And the house itself seemed to pulse around him, alive and hungry. He realized, with a cold certainty, that this wasn't just a game anymore. The house wasn't just haunted, it was hunting him. Ethan pressed himself against the cold, damp wall of the basement, every muscle in his body trembling. The flashlight had gone out when he had crashed into the shelf, and now he was swallowed by complete darkness. The whispers had stopped, but in their place was a low, throbbing vibration, as if the house itself was alive, breathing around him. He fumbled along the wall, his fingers scraping across splintered wood, until he found the staircase. But when he tried to climb, the steps felt wrong, longer, steeper, impossibly distorted. It was like the house was stretching and reshaping itself, trying to trap him forever. At the top, he stumbled into a long corridor. The wallpaper was torn, revealing the dark, rotting wood beneath. Faded photographs hung crookedly along the walls, people with their faces scratched out, eyes gouged into black hollows. One photo froze him in place, a young boy, pale and terrified, holding a flashlight, standing in a room that looked exactly like his own bedroom. Ethan's blood ran cold. The whispers returned, softer now, almost mournful. "You remember, don't you? Who are you?" Ethan stammered, his voice shaking. No answer, just the eerie creak of the floor beneath him. He turned a corner and entered what looked like a living room. Dust-covered furniture sagged under the weight of decades, and cobwebs stretched across every surface. On the mantel, an old, cracked mirror reflected the dim glow of his flashlight. He leaned closer, and the reflection changed. It wasn't his own face staring back. It was the old woman from the basement, her eyes white, her grin grotesque and endless. Behind her, the reflection showed a door opening, and dozens of shadowy figures peering from inside, faceless, watching. Ethan stumbled backward, nearly falling. The mirror cracked in the center with a deafening snap. From within the shattered glass came a sickly, wet scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across bone. A sudden realization hit him. The house wasn't just haunted, it remembered. It remembered everyone who had entered. Every fear, every scream, every desperate attempt to escape. And now, it was cataloging him. He turned, desperate to leave, and froze. A figure stood at the end of the room, barely visible in the shadows. A little girl, pale as moonlight, with hollow eyes that seemed too old for her face. She smiled a smile that wasn't friendly, but knowing. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice soft but dripping with menace. "The house it chooses, and you, it wants." Before Ethan could react, she vanished, leaving behind a chilling echo of laughter. The hallway stretched before him like a living thing, doors and windows rearranging themselves, creating a labyrinth, impossible to navigate. Every step he took made the walls seem closer, the air heavier, the shadows darker, and then he saw it. A door with scratch marks carved deep into the wood, spelling his name. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the handle. The whispers grew louder, converging into a single, deafening voice. "You cannot leave. You belong to the house." Ethan's mind raced. He had to escape, but every instinct told him that the house wouldn't let him. Not alive. A sudden noise behind him, a dragging, shuffling step, made him spin. Nothing was there, but the air shifted, colder than ice. The sense of being watched was overwhelming. Ethan realized with horror that every shadow could be the old woman. Every whisper could be a trap, and the house itself was learning, adapting to him. With a shaky breath, he moved forward, toward the door with his name. He had no plan, no weapon, only the faint hope that somehow, if he kept moving, he might survive the night. But the house remembered, and it had plans for him. Ethan's hand hovered over the door handle, cold sweat dripping down his temples. The scratches on the wood seemed to writhe, shifting slightly, like the house itself was alive and breathing around him. He could hear whispers again, this time clearer, more urgent, echoing in every corner of the corridor. "You are ours. You cannot leave." He forced the door open. Beyond, it was a narrow hallway, lined with doors that shouldn't exist, some with peeling paint, others blackened as if charred. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic. Blood-dot the whispers coalesced into a single voice, raspy and commanding. "Follow, or be trapped forever." Ethan swallowed hard, stepping forward, flashlight shaking. The walls seemed to stretch, elongating and twisting as he moved. Each door he passed had something behind it, shadows that flickered and twisted like living nightmares. One door cracked open on its own, revealing a room filled with broken furniture and a rocking chair that moved slowly back and forth. He froze, then noticed a figure slumped in the chair, the old woman. But before he could react, she vanished, leaving only the rocking chair swaying in silence. Ethan's stomach churned. He had the sickening realization that she could appear anywhere, at any time. He moved quickly down the hall, and the walls began whispering his thoughts aloud, mocking him. "You think you can escape. You think you are safe. We know your fear." Suddenly, a hand cold skeletal, and impossibly fast, clamped over his shoulder. He spun around, heart hammering. No one was there. The hand was gone, but the icy chill lingered. A door at the end of the hallway opened slowly. Light spilled out, a warm golden glow that seemed inviting. Desperate, Ethan ran toward it. As he approached, he realized it opened into a living room. He recognized it was his own house, but twisted, like a reflection in a cracked mirror. Furniture was in the same places, but everything was warped, decayed, and alive with shadows. The TV flickered on, showing static hand in the static. He could see himself, sitting at the foot of his bed, staring into the screen. Ethan staggered backward. Then, a voice, clear and cutting through the static. "You're already inside. Inside the game. Inside the house." Panic seized him. He ran through the living room, crashing into walls, furniture, anything to escape the impossible labyrinth. But the house had changed. Again the front door had vanished. Windows revealed only endless darkness, fog swirling outside. From above came a creaking sound, slow and deliberate. Ethan looked up. A chandelier, swinging without wind, cast long, jagged shadows. And in the shadows, he saw Hertha, old woman, floating, gliding across the ceiling with that same impossible grin, eyes white and unblinking. Ethan ran, turning a corner, only to find the hallway lined with dozens of mirrors. His own reflection stared back, twisted and pale. Then, in each mirror, the old woman appeared behind him, closer and closer with each second. He spun around. Nothing. He spun again. Still nothing. The mirrors began to crack, spreading like spider webs. From within the cracks, he heard scratching, dragging, and low laughter, a chorus of trapped souls, screaming silently. Then, one voice, louder than the rest, pierced his mind. "You think you can leave, but we choose who stays." Ethan realized the horrifying truth. The house didn't just hunt him. It fed on fear, grew stronger with it, and now, it had chosen him. Desperate, he slammed his shoulder into the nearest door, forcing it open. Beyond, it was a staircase leading down into the basement. The same basement, but it felt different this time, more alive, more oppressive. Shadows stretched across the walls, crawling like insects, and the whispering voices grew louder, almost deafening, and at the bottom of the stairs, he saw Hertha, old woman, kneeling on the floor, hands stretched toward him. Her grin was wider than humanly possible, and in that moment, Ethan understood. There was no running, no escaping. The house had already claimed him, but a small, impossible thought pushed him forward. If he could make it to the heart of the house, maybe he could survive. Maybe. Ethan's legs trembled as he descended the basement stairs again, each step groaning under his weight. The shadows seemed thicker here, as if the darkness itself was alive, crawling over the walls and floor, whispering unintelligible words that made his skin crawl. The old woman was gone, but he could feel her presence, watching, waiting. The basement had changed since his last visit. The air was colder, and the walls seemed to pulse, like the house's heartbeat, slow and deliberate. In the far corner, he noticed a small door he hadn't seen before. It was partially hidden behind a stack of rotting crates. He approached cautiously, flashlight trembling. The door creaked open to reveal a hidden room, lined with shelves filled with dusty journals, photographs, and odd trinkets. Ethan picked up one of the journals. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. As he flipped it open, he realized the handwriting was frantic, almost manic. The first entry read, "The house chooses. It feeds. It remembers. Whoever enters does not leave. I thought I could survive. I was wrong." He flipped through more pages. Each journal belonged to someone who had entered the house before him. Names, dates, desperate scribbles about whispers, shadows, and the old woman. One page made him freeze. "She waits in the mirrors. She watches through the eyes of the dolls. You can't hide. You can't run. She knows you." Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was a prison for the living, a predator, feeding on fear, cataloging each soul it trapped. A sudden noise made him jump, a soft, wet scraping from the far end of the room. Ethan swung his flashlight toward it. Shadows moved in the corner, and the faint outline of the old woman appeared, her eyes unblinking. Ethan stumbled backward. I don't want to play," he shouted, voice shaking. She tilted her head. the grin widening impossibly. "You don't have a choice," she rasped. Desperate, Ethan turned and ran deeper into the hidden room. On a low shelf, he spotted an old key. Something about it felt important. He grabbed it, heart hammering, and realized it fit a small, locked door in the corner of the basement, one that hadn't been there before. He inserted the key. The lock clicked. The door swung open to reveal a spiral staircase descending into darkness that smelled of earth and decay. From below came faint whispering, urgent, demanding, "Come, you belong, come." Ethan knew he should turn back, but something told him this staircase might lead to the heart of the house, the source of its power. If he could confront it there, maybe he could escape. Maybe. With a deep breath, he began to descend, each step taking him deeper into the oppressive darkness. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows reaching out like living tendrils. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening, and in the corners of his vision, he caught glimpses of figures trapped in the walls, eyes wide, mouths screaming silently. At the bottom of the staircase was a massive, circular room. The ceiling arched impossibly high, filled with shadows that writhed and shifted. At the center stood a throne of twisted wood and bone, and upon it, the old woman, seated, staring at him. "You came," she said, voice echoing unnaturally. "And now, you stay." Ethan's stomach twisted. He realized the house was no longer just trying to scare him. It was testing him. Every hallway, every shadow, every whisper was designed to break him, to make him fear enough to belong. As he took a hesitant step forward, the room shifted, the walls bending, stretching, and the shadows solidifying into forms of people trapped long ago. They reached toward him with clawed hands, mouths opening in silent screams. Ethan clutched the key in his pocket. It felt heavier than it should, pulsing with energy. Somewhere in his mind, a tiny spark of hope whispered, maybe this key is the house's weakness. Maybe it can save him, if he can survive long enough to use it. And then the old woman rose from the throne, her grin impossibly wide, her white eyes piercing his soul. The air thickened around him, suffocating, and Ethan realized with pure bone-deep terror, the real game was only just beginning. Ethan's legs trembled as he stood frozen before the old woman, her white eyes fixed on him like a predator sizing up its prey. The throne she had sat upon seemed to ripple, growing taller, its twisted wood extending upward like grasping fingers. Shadows poured from the walls, solidifying into humanoid shapes, all staring at him with empty eyes. He swallowed hard, gripping the key in his pocket like a lifeline. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but the staircase behind him had vanished. The only way forward was past her, and she didn't move like a normal human. Her limbs stretched unnaturally as she glided toward him, silent, unstoppable. Then, without warning, the floor beneath Ethan trembled and cracked. The shadows surged forward, clawing at his feet. He stumbled, trying to keep his balance. His flashlight flickered on the floor, casting long, distorted beams across the room. In each beam, he saw the trapped souls, figures of men, women, and children, twisted in grotesque poses, silently screaming, reaching for him. A low, rasping hiss filled the room. "Run, or stay forever." Ethan bolted. He dodged the first grasping shadows, but they were fast, moving unnaturally, their hands brushing against him, cold and heavy like chains. He ran in a circle, trying to find an escape, but every doorway led him back to the same room. The old woman floated closer, her grin widening impossibly, and the whispers now roared in his mind. "Fear feeds us. Fear makes you mine." In a panic, he remembered the key. Pulling it from his pocket, he realized it was glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Maybe it could open something in the house that would give him a chance. Desperation lent him courage. He swung the key toward a massive mirror on the far wall, one of the mirrors that had shown him the old woman before. The glass shimmered unnaturally as the key touched it, cracking in jagged lines. A cold wind rushed out from the mirror, and, for a brief instant, the shadows recoiled, hissing. Ethan didn't hesitate. He kicked the mirror with all his strength, and it shattered, sending shards flying like frozen daggers. The old woman shrieked an inhuman sound that rattled his bones, and lunged at him. He dove through the opening the mirror created, landing hard on cold stone. On the other side, the air was still, almost peaceful, but he knew it was a trap. The room beyond was smaller, circular, with doors all around, each door leading somewhere, or maybe nowhere at all. The whispers had turned into mocking laughter. Ethan backed up against the wall. One door opened slowly. Candlelight spilled out, revealing a long hallway filled with hundreds of dolls, all staring at him with broken, glassy eyes. From the shadows, a low scraping sound began like claws dragging across wood. The old woman's voice echoed, "The house remembers. The house chooses. You cannot hide." A doll at the end of the hallway twitched, then slowly turned its head toward him. Another followed, and another. Soon, the entire hallway was alive, crawling with dolls that moved impossibly fast. Snapping their tiny jaws, Ethan sprinted, heart hammering, leaping over broken furniture and avoiding grasping hands that seemed to reach out from the walls themselves. Somewhere behind him, the old woman's laughter rang louder than ever, mingling with the whispers and the scraping, driving him toward the final door at the end of the hall. He flung it open and stumbled into a room filled with shadows, but this time, the shadows weren't hostile. They were twisted shapes of people, faces blank, yet somehow familiar. They reached toward him, not with malice, but pleading. Ethan understood. They were trapped souls, victims of the house, who had failed before him. And then the door slammed, shut behind him. The room went pitch black, except for a faint, pulsing light emanating from the key in his hand. He realized, with a mixture of fear and hope, that this key might be the only way out. But the old woman's whisper was in his ear again, bone deep and chilling. The game has only begun, and the house always wins. Ethan's chest heaved as he clutched the glowing key, the faint light casting jagged shadows across the walls of the dark room. The trapped souls reached toward him with desperate hands, their blank faces twisted in silent screams. For the first time, he realized the house wasn't just a building, it was a sentient predator, feeding on fear, storing the essence of those it trapped. The whispers returned, louder now, surrounding him, echoing in every corner of the room. "You cannot leave. You belong. You are ours." Summoning every ounce of courage, Ethan pressed forward. The key pulsed hotter in his hand, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. He understood instinctively it was the house's weakness, the one thing that could let him confront the old woman and maybe survive. A door at the far end of the room creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder, each breath forming frost in front of his mouth. Shadows stretched along the walls like living tendrils, reaching for him, whispering his name. Step by step, he descended, the whispers growing louder, almost deafening. At the bottom, he entered a massive, circular chamber, the heart of the house. The ceiling arched impossibly high, twisting like black smoke. In the center was a throne carved from bone and rotting wood, and upon it, the old woman sat, her grin impossibly wide, eyes pure white and unblinking. "You came," she rasped, her voice echoing unnaturally. "And now, you stay." Ethan's stomach churned. The floor beneath him seemed to pulse like a living thing, and the shadows around the throne writhed, coalescing into horrifying shapes, former victims of the house. They moved silently, reaching for him with clawed hands, begging for release. Clutching the key, Ethan realized it wasn't just a key, it was a weapon. He held it out, and the light flared, forcing the shadows back. The old woman hissed, a sound like metal scraping bone. She rose from her throne, towering impossibly, stretching toward the ceiling. "Fear makes you mine," she whispered. Ethan's mind raced. He had to act quickly. He lunged forward, plunging the key into a dark, pulsating mass at the base of her throne, the heart of the house itself. The shadows screamed, the walls trembled, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. The old woman shrieked, her form flickering and twisting like smoke caught in a storm. The trapped souls around him began to glow, their forms stabilizing. One by one, they were freed, dissipating into the air with whispers of thanks. Ethan staggered back, the key pulsing violently in his hand. The old woman's voice cut through the chaos. "You think you can escape, but you only delay the inevitable." With a final, horrifying howl, she lunged at him. Ethan dodged and slammed the key into the pulsating mass again. The chamber erupted in blinding light, shadows screaming and twisting as the house began to collapse in on itself. Ethan felt himself being thrown backward, tumbling through darkness, walls and floors folding in impossible angles. The last thing he saw was the old woman's face, frozen in a scream, before the light swallowed everything. When he opened his eyes, he was back in his bedroom. The laptop was off. The room was silent. The faint glow from the key had vanished. He stumbled to his feet, chest heaving, heart pounding. But something was wrong. The shadows in the corners of the room lingered, thicker than before, almost alive. And from the darkness came a whisper, soft but unmistakable. "We will be back. You cannot hide forever." Ethan realized with bone-deep dread that the house wasn't gone. It had been delayed, weakened, but it was still out there, waiting. He sank to the floor, gripping his head. Knowing one thing for certain, the nightmare wasn't over. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, sweat soaking his shirt, chest heaving. The house was gone, or so he thought, but the shadows in the corners of his room seemed heavier now, lingering longer, crawling closer to the light. The key was gone, vanished in the collapse of the house's heart, leaving only a faint warmth in his pocket as a reminder. Days passed, tore, maybe hours. Time felt warped. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of light, made him jump. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even during daylight, shadows seemed to cling unnaturally to walls, corners, and furniture. One night, Ethan woke to the sound of scratching at his bedroom window, heart hammering. He grabbed a flashlight. Outside, nothing moved. But when he turned back, the beam caught something in the mirror, a pale, twisted reflection of the old woman staring at him, her grin impossibly wide. Ethan blinked. She vanished. But the whispers returned, soft and insidious. "You cannot hide. We are always here, waiting." He tried to tell himself it was his imagination, that he had survived, and the nightmare was over. But he knew the truth. The house had left a part of itself behind. Its influence lingered, whispering in his mind, watching him through shadows and reflections. Every night the visions grew stronger. Shadows moved independently of the light. Voices whispered his name, repeating his deepest fears. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. Ethan stopped sleeping, stopped leaving his room. Even the simplest tasks became impossible. He was trapped in a prison, built by fear itself. Then came the night he saw the door appear in his room. It was black, ancient-looking, framed with twisted wood and carvings he didn't recognize. It hadn't been there before. A chill swept the room, carrying the metallic scent of decay. The whispers screamed now, urgent and frenzied. "It's time. Come. Belong." Ethan's blood ran cold. He understood with a crushing certainty, the house wasn't gone. It had found a way back. And this door, this portal, was a gateway to the heart of the nightmare again. He backed away, shaking, but something inside him, the same instinct that had kept him alive before, told him that he couldn't ignore it. If the house wanted him again, he had to face it. There was no running, no hiding. Survival meant confronting the darkness one last time. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ethan approached the door. The air around it pulsed like a heartbeat. Shadows writhed behind the frame, clawing toward him. And then, the door swung open on its own, revealing the hallway of mirrors, filled with the old woman's reflection in every pane, all staring, all smiling. Ethan's throat went dry. He realized the final truth. The house was not just a place. It was a living predator, endless and patient, feeding on fear, adapting, remembering. And now, it was ready for the last hunt. With a deep breath, he stepped through the doorway. The whisper followed, bone deep and chilling. "Welcome back, Ethan. The game is not over." Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps as he stepped through the doorway into the hallway of mirrors. Each reflection showed the old woman, her grin wider than any human could manage, her eyes pure white, unblinking. Shadows crawled along the walls like living creatures, whispering his fears back to him in distorted, mocking voices. The air was thick and heavy, suffocating, pulsing with the heartbeat of the house itself. He held the key in his hand, though. It no longer glowed. Somehow, he knew its power had diminished, but not disappeared. The house had been weakened before, but never destroyed. Ahead, at the end of the hallway, the mirrors began to warp, melting into a massive doorway. Beyond it was a vast, dark chamber, the heart of the house, alive and writhing. Walls covered in twisted faces, mouths screaming silently. The old woman waited there, standing tall on a throne made of blackened bones. "You've come back," she hissed, voice echoing unnaturally. "Brave, foolish, or both. But it doesn't matter. You belong to me, now." Ethan swallowed hard, clutching the key. He realized with bone-deep fear that the house didn't just trap bodies, it trapped souls. Every whisper, every shadow, every reflection was a fragment of someone who had entered and failed. And now, the house wanted him, completely. The old woman lifted her arms. Shadows surged forward, massive and writhing, twisting into horrifying shapes. Ethan's mind raced. There was no way to fight them physically, but the key pulsed faintly, a reminder that there was one path left, to strike at the heart of the house itself. With a scream of determination, he ran toward the throne, the shadows clawing at him from all sides. The floor pulsed beneath his feet like a living creature, trying to pull him under. Every reflection in the mirrors along the walls screamed his name, mocking his every move. At the throne, he plunged the key into the black mass at the center, the heart of the house. Light exploded outward, blinding and pure. Shadows writhed and screamed, dissolving into smoke. The old woman screamed, a sound of fury and pain, as her form flickered, twisting impossibly. The chamber shook violently, walls cracking and groaning. Ethan stumbled backward as the house convulsed around him. Then, silence. He opened his eyes. The hallway of mirrors was gone. The shadows were gone. The air smelled like fresh rain. For a moment, it seemed over. But then he looked down. His hands were scratched and bleeding, and in the reflection of the window, he saw something horrifying. The faint outline of the old woman, standing behind him, smiling. Ethan spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, but the whisper reached him again, softer this time, almost intimate. "We will always be here, waiting, until you come back." Ethan sank to the floor, chest heaving. He knew the truth. He had survived, but the house had not been destroyed. It had been delayed. It had been weakened. But somewhere, out there, it still existed, patient, eternal, feeding on fear, waiting for the next time. He looked at the key now, dull, powerless, and understood the final, crushing reality. The house was not a place. It was a curse, a predator that never dies. Ethan whispered to himself, voice trembling, "I survived, but it's never really over." And somewhere, deep in the shadows, the old woman's grin widened once more. The screen of his laptop flickered, then went black. The whispers returned. The nightmare was over. For now.